What's happening? Yours truly, Javon Freeman. This one I think is going to be decent. We are tapping in with Connecticut. I no longer live there, but this is News Channel 8, located in the metropolitan area of New Haven, Connecticut. I used to work there. Uh, even though I was just a cleaner, you know, I did get a chance to, clean around the soundboard, be in a broadcasting room, television rooms, the what do you call it? The server rooms. Did a lot of cleaning, you know. But I was there around a whole bunch of people. Van Nyberg. Honestly, I think the most honest person I spoken to. Don't get me wrong. One of the cameramen, he was. I am so sorry. I forgot his name. Oh, he was so cool. He put me in contact with one of his pals that he had went to school with. His buddy had gave me some great information at the time. But outside of him, Joe Ferry was definitely a very, very honest, forthright guy, and I appreciated that. But anyway, let's get into this. See what they got to say. Trump taxes and how it affects Connecticut. Let's see what happens.
And with us now is the Commissioner of Economic and Community Development, Dan O'Keefe. Commissioner O'Keefe, good to see you back here in the program.
Good to see you. Thank you for having me.
So I know, like, during the State of the State address, the governor said that we have to figure out how to navigate.
Yeah, I've been all up in that place, cleaning, all that good stuff. I guess it's not a big deal, but hey, they're reporting news. Now I'm reporting on them. Look how the tables have turned.
During the Trump era, what has it been like so far in the first week or so?
So far, it's been pretty chaotic, if I'm being honest. You know, one thing we learned from the first Trump administration is he views unpredictability as a feature, not a bug. So we can't expect there to be a high degree of predictability. But just today, for example, last night, we all woke up this morning to an executive order saying all federal funding was being shut down. That has since been put on pause by a federal judge literally an hour ago, but that gives you a sense for the kind of unpredictability we're dealing with as an administration. But what the governor said is right. It is our duty on behalf of the people of Connecticut to find a way to work with this administration to make sure we optimize however best we can for the state of Connecticut.
And we've done some reporting on the impact of social services because of this pause in funding, but how has it impacted economic development, your department?
Well, so Controller Scanlon said today that federal funding in the last fiscal year represented about $14 billion in total funding. So that's funding that goes towards many programs, including ones that are managed by the DECD, Economic Development Programs. It's a significant amount of money.
How could tariffs impact Connecticut?
So again, we're still waiting to see where tariffs might be imposed. So what matters for the state of Connecticut is we have certain large industries, which if tariffs are imposed on supply chains and regions where those supply chains are functioning, then the costs for those companies will obviously increase. So one of the things we've done is we've recently announced a program, a $25 million program called Strategic Supply Chains, where if you are in one of those supply chains, so it needs to make sense for the state of Connecticut. It needs to be a company that is supplying a strategic industry for us. And you're in a...
Man, Connecticut is scratching at thick ice. Let me give you just so you can see it for yourself. Take a look at this. Oh wait, hold on. I'm about to do something I didn't want to do. Yep. Take a look at this. In 2024, Connecticut state debt was about $42 billion, with local government debt of about $12.44 billion. Oh my gosh. And this is pension debt, school construction, and transportation work. I'm telling you now, Connecticut's, they got so much. Let me see. Pension debt. Connecticut has over $37 billion in unfunded pension obligations. Wow. This is due to inadequate savings between 1939 and 2010. Oof. So what that tells me is that the people managing the money is not doing what they're supposed to do. Hold on. Were y'all not even looking at this? I want you to see what I see. I want you to see what I see. Look at that. Look at that. See that? Retiree healthcare program. Connecticut has over 17 billion owed to the retiree healthcare program. Has also suffered from insufficient funding. But man, when I tell you, listen here. When I tell you that there are so many people that get these politician seats, I'm upset that I was so young. But I get it. When you're young, you're impressionable. I truly get it. You're impressionable. I didn't understand what was going on. But I can also say it's the fault of the elders to a certain degree because they were picking these elected officials, or they were not picking them and not going to the local elections, doing what they were supposed to do, elected people that would properly manage the money. Ah, man, I mean, this is just bad. Let's get back into this. Let's get back into this, right? Wage arrangement. 2022 agreement with the State Employee Labor Union Coalition increased future pension costs by 4.5 billion. Connecticut pays a greater share of municipal school construction costs than any other state. Debt compared to other states. Okay, Connecticut's per capita debt of $8,000 2022 was 4 times the national average of $1,800. That's crazy. Connecticut's next tax supported debt as a percentage of its revenue was 103%. And people wonder why I was so quick to leave. I'm like, man, there's so many bad apples in the work environment, just where I was working at. I think Yale as a company itself was great. Hear me clearly. I didn't want to talk about Yale. But man, when you're talking about the fight, this is what led into me saying, I'm out. Yale was a decent starter job for me. It could have been a whole lot more. I didn't mind making it a career because I know what I'm going to do with my money. I know how to maneuver money. But there were so many bad apples in the environment that I was like, why would I want to be here? I mean, but I was able to put up with bad apples. Bad apples doesn't make and break whether I go do my job and show up and get the best performance that I can give. I'm a worker. My father raised me to do such, to put my best foot forward in any and everything I do to the best of my abilities. That's what I do. Man, I love the patients to a strong degree. And even the patients that were having a hard time and getting on the nurses' nerves, when the nurses at St. Raphael's, when the nurses would see me and they had a hard time, a lot of them knew that they could relax their shoulders when I was around. I had an unspoken ability that money couldn't buy, still can't buy, to where the patients that were, in the rest, maybe even your mentally unstable patients, somehow miraculously became mentally stable. I don't know. And I say that humbly. I don't say that to be cocky. But then when I'm sitting there and I'm saving money, but then I look at my lifestyle, I can't go out. People don't go to parks. I can't afford to get a car, even though I'm saving money. If I don't go to work and I don't do 60 hours, within 2 months, I would have lost all my savings just from paying rent alone. I can't even keep my fridge full. Still can't buy a car, and if I did buy a car, I wouldn't be able to afford Connecticut taxes on the cars. So you don't even really own your car. And then I would have to pay for insurance. I couldn't afford that either. Like, economically, it was bad. It's very bad. And I'm working at what many consider a great job. The economics of the state itself was terrible. Let's get back into this. Let's see what else they're talking about. Connecticut is considered one of the highest liability states, along with Hawaii, Illinois, New Jersey, and Vermont. Well, looky here. What's going on in Illinois? Well, we know what's going on in Illinois. They got the whole isn't Tom Homan? I know Tom Homan and Pete Hegseth just went down to the border. But they got a whole lot of ICE stuff going on. I know Connecticut got some sanctuary cities. I believe New Haven is a sanctuary city. Oh well. And here's my thing. We're not in a place where we can take in illegals. I really didn't even want to get into illegals on this right now, but we're not in a place where we could take in illegals in Connecticut. I'm not even in Connecticut, but it wasn't really the thing. And here's why. The economy is bad. Shout out to people trying to make their way. But, and I've been around illegal migrants. I ain't going to sit there single them out. But here's the thing, get it how you can, cool. But you're undercutting me because I understand the value. So, like, let's say, for example, the true term for a cleaner is a custodian. In America, you get paid by your job title. In corporate America, they have no problem making that clear. You're the CEO, you get paid as a CEO. Okay, well, the true terminology for a cleaner is custodian. Custodian is the oldest job in the world. Some say it's prostitution. Wrong. It's custodian. Why? In the English language, custodian is rooted to Latin. The Latin root of custodian is custodial. Custodial means guardianship. What does a custodian have guardianship over? The federal cleanliness guidelines. If any public facility doesn't meet a federal cleanliness guideline standard, it has every right to be shut down by the federal government. Okay, so now we're getting somewhere, right? I'm getting paid minimum wage, but I have the ultimate duty to make sure that this place doesn't get shut down. And not just me, I mean, a whole team of us, we have the duty to make sure this place doesn't get shut down. But we look down on our cleaners. It's interesting that that's the society we live in. When majority people knew back in the day when a lot of these businesses were founded and created by the founder and ran by the person that created it, you treat the custodian the same way you treat the owner. Why? Because the owner understands the value of what it is to be a cleaner. When you're creating these businesses and you don't have people, and I'm not saying those that, took loans and were able to start with employees. I mean, no, those that did the job themselves. You understand the value of having to keep a clean work environment so you can work effectively. You can't work effectively in a whole heap of mess. And that can be said for any work environment, not just a hospital, but even at your clothing stores, even at your food restaurants. There's a reason why you get a letter grade at a food restaurant. There's a cleanliness, like, these are American values for a reason. But then you allow immigrants to come in. You got to make the language a lot more simpler for people to understand. And then in doing so, you also get to cut the value because they're not understanding the value of the language in which they're speaking and the names in which we have these job titles under. Now, I'll also say this too. Even the women, some people could make the argument and say, well, just take the men and leave the women. That would be nice, but the women sit here and pick up these piss poor American values and they don't behave well. Like, bro. I mean, you're not doing yourself any solids here. From the men or the women. Yeah, I mean, and that's just the immigrant side of things. But Americans got their own BS to clean up. But how can we clean up our BS and we cleaning up people who ain't even do the work to be? And then what about, honestly, I think this is a fair conversation. What about the people that took the time to go through the process to do it the right way? It's a vigorous process for a reason. We want to make sure that you have invested interest here. It's not like war just stops because people ain't shooting guns in the street. War takes place on multiple plateaus and on multiple frontiers. Yeah, so anyway, we're not even a minute or 3 minutes into this. Let's get back into this, see what he got to say.
A region where you're potentially exposed to some of these tariffs will help with incentives to move some of that production capacity onto our shores into the state of Connecticut.
And how will this create jobs in your estimation?
So production capacity is a simple way of saying jobs. So if you're investing in the infrastructure in the plant to build whatever these widgets are, you need people to do it. So it's directly related to job creation.
Let's talk a little bit about the defense industry, which of course is a big factor in our economy here in our state. And the president has said that he wants to make the military the biggest and best ever. Any word as to what kind of impact we might get from that here in our state?
I mean, not yet, but you are right. We have a pretty large manufacturing industry in the state of Connecticut. It's a little over 12% of our economy. If you look at the New England region, that's a much higher percentage than any other state in the region. And you ask yourself why that is. It's because, as you mentioned, we have a very large national defense business here. That's a legacy that goes back 100 years. We've built a very specialized workforce to be able to produce these incredibly complicated.
I believe he's referring to Sikorsky.
Machines. That's the good.
I believe he's referring to Sikorsky. And just recently, I think did I pull it up for y'all? Hold on. I'm gonna pull it up for y'all. Drone planes. Um, okay, yeah. Let me get y'all right with this. I'll let y'all see this. The Sikorsky Cypher and Cypher 2 are types of unmanned aerial vehicles developed by Sikorsky Aircrafts. They are vertical takeoff and landing aircraft which use two opposing rudders enclosed in a circular shroud for propulsion. That is what it looks like. Oh no, that's the Black Hawk. Excuse me. Well, they've converted the Black Hawk helicopter into a drone. Oh well, this is I guess that's the concept model for their Cypher, but you know, it would be much more simpler. And from an engineering perspective, if I had to do it myself, it would just be much more simpler to take a Black Hawk helicopter and again to put some type of remote control feature inside the electrical body, and now you can sit there and pilot an entire helicopter remote control. You don't have to worry about pilots dying when you're deploying troops in any region whatsoever. That is a whole lot more simpler than trying to, build an entire craft, to do whatever it is you needed to do. Anyway, let's get back into this.
News. We view that as a relatively protected industry, and in fact, our hope is many of these areas where the supply chains might be impacted, these might be relevant for those same companies.
I want to talk about housing for a little bit because the governor mentioned that in his State of the State address as well. And we've seen a lot of new housing being built, particularly apartments in the cities, Stamford, Hartford, a whole bunch of them in and around Duncan Park and downtown, a lot of conversions in New Haven as well. Where do you see this going in 2020?
Oh man, when I was in New Haven a couple days ago, it used to be an entire grass area. Now, back in the day when my mom was a kid, it used to be all homes. And then it got turned into just a grass area. And then it got turned into parking lot spaces. And now they've turned it into apartment housing. They're literally building as we speak, and it's a shame. It's a shame what it's come to. But hey, corporations buying up the land, buying up the property.
25. What kind of new projects?
Yeah, I mean, look, the good news is that our population's been increasing. So if you look at the trends post-pandemic, pre-pandemic, our population was decreasing. Post-pandemic, it wasn't just a pandemic blip. Every year since the pandemic, our population has increased. That's the good news. Bad news is you got to find places to put folks. And by the way, you got to find it at a moment in time where we started to see inflation and the cost of that housing increase. The governor has announced a multi-year commitment to housing, $800 million. That's almost 3x. What we've invested in housing historically, and that's started to be very effective. So if you look at net housing starts, that number had been flat for about 15 years. It was positive, meaning we were adding to our housing stock, but it wasn't growing. In the last 2 years, that number's up almost 50%. And I think that's for two reasons. The first is I mentioned the support that this administration is doing for housing, but I think more importantly, it's because builders, developers are getting more optimistic about the state of Connecticut. They're seeing the exact same trends I am and saying this is actually a good time to start taking a bet on building housing stock for Connecticut.
And what kind of small businesses do you think we'll see growing out of these apartment clusters, so to speak? Because in Hartford, we've seen a lot of new restaurants, things like that.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I know I influenced a whole lot. But no, these investors have been, I feel bad for the builders. I feel so bad because it's not something that they can fix in a matter of a year or two. They're going to need multiple presidential term elections where the money is managed properly. Like, okay, hypothetically speaking, let's say JD Vance becomes president next, right? And he stays true to the principle we aren't dishing out money to other countries unnecessarily. He stays true to that. You could probably see some type of prosperity in their housing market in the last 2 years of a 2 consecutive term by JD Vance. They're still building the homes. Let's say you get it done now, cool. Inflation is still up. Connecticut still has a debt to be cleared in multiple sectors. They gotta recoup that money somehow. So rent is still gonna be high. Like the new low rent is like, I was fortunate. I was paying 1,200 without amenities included, but it was practically a dump. When I moved in, it was rats and roaches infested. The exterminator had to keep coming. Oh, man, I really don't want to trash the owner, but even the exterminator was like, man, the people that own this place, they ain't never gonna put money into it. So it was, I mean, again, I was grateful to have a roof over my head. I truly am, but 1,200 for what I paid for it, and it was a 1 bedroom. I think it was like 800 square feet. That was like, that was outrageous, and that was considered good for the time. I was just looking at people like, what world are we living in? This is almost like Brave New World. Aldous Huxley, was that his name? Brave New World. Aldous Huxley. Yep, I'm grateful I read that book in high school. Shout out my shout out my English teacher, Miss Dima. She, I'm grateful she had to read that book. Very, very grateful. And The Crucible. Anyways, get back into this.
Like that.
Yeah, so if you look at new business starts, so my role is both Commissioner of Economic Development, but also Chief Innovation Officer for the state. So I spend a lot of time thinking about and working with the ecosystem supporting our small businesses, including our startups. And if you look at new startup growth, year on year, we grew faster than any other state in the region. And by the way, faster than places like Florida and Georgia, places that people looked at and said, well, isn't everybody moving and starting down in these sort of southern states post-pandemic? Those states did benefit, but it was a blip. It was a short-term benefit, whereas the trends that we've seen here in Connecticut have sustained.
You know, years ago, the governor said, I think he used Delray Beach as an example.
And what they're not telling you is that a lot of these businesses that are starting off loans. So it's like they're trapped in forever payments. The whole point of a business is to become affluent in your business, not to have a business so you could pay somebody else's business. Bro, like the number of businesses, if you knew just how many, and if they're not on loans, oh my gosh, the amount of businesses that are funded with money that, because again, the reality of the world is that not everybody does good business. I mean, I ain't stepping on nobody's business. I ain't saying nobody's names. What I am saying is, it's not like people just it's not like people just stop doing dirty deeds behind closed doors and then washing their money, with what looks like a legitimate business. Anyway, let's get back into this.
Example said he wanted to keep people in Connecticut rather than moving to Florida. And we've seen a little bit of that. And there seems to be a lot of negative stories about Florida recently, too, in terms of like condo fees going up because of all the climate change and the weather situations. Are you seeing people kind of slowing down or maybe putting a pause on leaving Connecticut for warmer climes?
We are. So if you look at overall population trends, our total population is going up. But if you break it down domestically, meaning that the number we benefit from people moving to our state from another state versus those that are leaving, that's been negative. We tend to basically lose more people to the south than we gain from places like New York and Massachusetts. The reason for that is we have an aging population. But the good news is we make up for that in international in-migration. That's why our total population goes up.
Now, you heard me say there are sanctuary cities in Connecticut. Connecticut is not a place where, like, people are leaving. It's not just like, they say it's an aging population in Connecticut, which it is. It's almost like a wealthy man's retirement place, but that wealthy man can expect to go broke before they die. So, but the kids are leaving because we can't start. Like, again, Gen Z, I've shown you the breakdown, I believe, in one of my videos where the output is dramatically higher, and then the stakes are even higher in Connecticut. So as somebody that's starting from nothing, it's hard to it's a miracle that I saved up money so I can even move. People are moving and going in debt to move just so they can get back to zero and start working again. I had money saved so I could move. I'm an outlier. Anyway.
If I look at the last couple of years, we're starting to see those trends around domestic outmigration start to slow. And I think it's the exact dynamic you describe, is people are starting to realize, okay,
People can't afford
quality of
to
education
leave.
is not as high as I thought it was going to be. Certainly it's not as high as what we have here in Connecticut. The quality of healthcare is not as high. The quality of life is not as high. And oh, by the way, expenses are going up because of all the factors you mentioned. So yes, we are starting to see that start to reverse. In fact, there was a Wall Street Journal article about that very fact.
All right, what can we get a sneak peek into what you know about the governor's budget address coming up? What can you tell us?
Look, I'll tell you
without
this.
revealing any.
I'm not going to reveal anything. I'll save that for the boss. But I will tell you, we are in a tight cycle right now. I think that is well understood.
Understatement.
The fiscal guardrails are going to be a topic of strong debate. I can tell you, as someone focused on the Connecticut economy, am very focused on retaining the fiscal guardrails. We cannot go back to where we were, which was described then as a permanent state of fiscal crisis. That was accurate. What we now have is an environment of consistent surpluses and predictability and stability. We are managing the state's finances like you and I should be managing our household, how we expect anyone to manage a business. It's the right thing to do, and I think it's going to be a more...
I think it sounds good, but man, this is way too late. Like, way, 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 way too late, because your workers, people like me that will get up and work. I was averaging, up until I left Connecticut, I was averaging 120 hours, 128 hours of pay period minimum. Like, the guys I was working with, we was putting up numbers crazy, like, and that was our stipulation. We will work, we'll do whatever we got to do as long as you make sure you have the hours for us to work. One of the guys I was working with was sitting there averaging almost 140 hours of pay period over the course of like 2 years. Like, we was putting in work. So it's your workers are leaving. Who wants to stay? That pool is shrinking. It seems good, but there's no economic prosperity. You're trying to economically maintain before you hit the bankrupt bell for an entire state. I mean, how many rich people are leaving Connecticut?
Challenging debate around the budget this year, but we'll get to the right place.
The Commissioner of Economic and Community Development, Dan O'Keefe. Always great to have you on the program. We'll see you again this year.
Yeah, it's hopeful a little too late. They're going to need a couple handful of years to actually get to where they would like to be. Anyway, this was fun. Let me know what you like in it. Let me know what you think down in the comments. It's been a long day. Anyway, tap in with me on Instagram at b.o.m.experience. Like, share, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell. We are rolling, baby. Betting on myself. You know it. Ciao.